Hi, this is 72 Daystar, and if there's an echo here, it's because I'm under a bridge, because I just tried to do a video and it was too windy, so I don't think it's going to work out sound-wise. I want to address a video by the producer of Valueoftruthdotorg, Brian Price. He makes 3 claims and lays down a challenge for any atheists, and so I'm going to try to address his points here. The first one is that there is a God. And my assertion to that would be, well, what God are you referring to? Marduk, Zeus, Apollo, one of my personal favorites, Cthulhu. Yeah, there's about as much proof for him as well. This is a burden of proof shifting attempt again, and this is part of the MO of fundamentalist Christians. Not just fundamentalist Christians, even Christians of a lot of different traditions will try this to shift the burden of proof. But if I have a wonderful invisible hat on, is it my responsibility to prove it, or your responsibility to prove it? I would suggest it's my responsibility to prove it. And if you're making a fantastic claim, like there's this big magical man who made the universe and is interacting with us, well then that's your responsibility to see that through. The next assertion you make is God is good. Now, I read the about on your page, and I understand that you're a Baptist and a biblical literalist. So if you're talking about the Bible God, then this is the God that commanded the Israelites to go into the Promised Land and kill people to, everyone. Kill the fighting men, of course. That's reasonable, right? But then beyond that, no, never mind that even the young fighting men in that group probably weren't all cool with what the older commanders were doing. But that's an aside. What I'd really like to address is this required them killing, infants. Or you're going to try to tell me that these infants were, used the evil baby hypothesis. It's really kind of hard to stomach. And I kind of have a question for anyone who would assert that, what's the righteous way to execute infants, anyways? Would you use the procedure where you'd corral them together and maybe feed them through to a killing floor, or would you just hack them as you go? But the Bible's not silent on it, actually. The Bible does describe a method of killing infants that involved grabbing them by the legs and dashing them against the rocks. So I guess there are a lot of options out there. I just wanted to know what the opinions of the Bible-believing Christians would say to address that. Other things, we're talking about a God that commands. I wouldn't say command. I think that would be an overstatement. But he's permissive of slavery, and in fact regulates it in such a sloppy way that it's just, and doesn't mention anywhere that this is something that's repugnant to him or something that would have to change in the future. And so if you take the position that, oh, it was just for the time, consider you have an omnipotent God that knows that his example in the Old Testament, the one that he provides, is going to be used to rationalize slavery, not just until the American Emancipation Proclamation, but to this day it's still cited in Muslim majority countries. They cite the traditions of the Old Testament as proof that this is something that's acceptable to God. So beyond that, what else did I want to mention? That that you have to imagine, if you can try to maintain the idea that God is good, you have to imagine a God all-knowing that will create the universe and create a tradition of worship where he knows that the overwhelming majority of people are going to fail. And if you're like Brian and you believe in a hell, which is a place of suffering, you have to imagine that all of those people are going to be carted off there, in many cases just for failing to believe. And they're going to characterize that as rejecting God, but really if you don't have any rational reason to believe God, how can you really in that sense be rejecting him? You're rejecting the evidence. You're not rejecting him because you don't believe he exists. So really, really hard to wrap your head around as a non-believer. And then he makes another, God, after God is good, he makes that you are not good, directing it generally. You are not good. I'd had to, my response to that would be, well, good is a subjective thing. If you're saying, if you characterize the people you're talking to as not good, I think that's a mischaracterization. You know, I think you would have to look sensibly at the person's overall package, so to speak. It's not that I don't think you have to be perfect to make the claim of to be good. I mean, it could be a good, you know, it's relative, and it's a relative thing. It's a subjective thing. So to make an ultimate claim of goodness is really nonsensical to me. You know, you can have a good tool. Say if you have a hammer and you have a good tool, but it's not the hammer's fault if you try to use it in a situation where it won't work. If you try to use it as a screwdriver and it fails, it's not that it's a bad hammer, it's that it was in the wrong situation. So I think that's really a nonsensical. And it's the miscommunication between people who believe in that it's a coherent idea that you could have objective morality and people who think that doesn't make sense whatsoever. And I would be one of those. Then you move on to the general, this really tired position. Nothing created everything. And no one's making that argument, of course, but Christians, biblical literalists especially, love to make that claim. And there's nothing to it, if you'll forgive the pun. Really, unless you're even if you're a theoretical physicist, at some point, or a cosmologist, at some point you have to say, well, we don't know that. There's not evidence for that. If you're a good scientist, this is the position you have to take. We don't know about that. There's not good evidence for it. So we're just going to say, for now, we don't know. We're still gathering evidence. And that's really, I think, the position that a lot of Christians especially, there is some research on this in psychology that fundamentalist Christians, on average, tend to be the sort of people who have a very difficult time just saying, I don't know, I'll just have to wait and see. You know, that general tendency is something that, on average, the fundamentalist Christian it has a difficult time doing. So I wonder if you share that handicap, Brian. So you say that, you know, it arrives at chance, that the alternative to believing God created the universe is to believe that everything's an accident and it all arrived by a chance fluke happening. And this is, again, a straw man. It's also a big waving your flag, I don't understand science, really. Because if you understood chemistry and physics, you would understand that it's really not about chance. The impossible stuff was eliminated. So all possibilities, as far as I understand it, are not on the table. The ones that were impossible couldn't happen. And the ones that were possible, obviously, were permissive of at least the chance of life forming. And there are a lot of scientists working on alternate universes where life could conceivably have happened, and we don't know. And again, this is where you have that discomforting conclusion that apparently fundamentalist Christians really don't like to arrive at, is to say we don't know. There could be other universes where life could exist. Who knows? I can't wait for them to send something up to Europa and see what's under the ice there. There's the potential even there. There's the potential that there might have been something in the past on Mars. I guess the tide has turned against ALH 84001. The pundits seem to think that that was not conclusive evidence for extraterrestrial life, but that potential is still there, and we might, with more work, geology, well, not geology, would that be Marsology, it could turn up. Romans 1:20, I want to address Romans 1:20. The context of Romans 1:20 is a world where people didn't know how trees grew. People didn't know how lightning propagated through the atmosphere. People didn't know what was behind earthquakes. To them, these were all supernatural events, and these are the things that Paul is referring to in Romans 1:20. This was the proof that it should be self-evident that God exists because, hey, we can't explain these things. Well, I'm afraid we've explained those things. But what happens is you get the goalposts moved again. Well, I guess that would be narrowing the goalpost. There is a narrowing there. But they're always free. I mean, they can keep doing this forever if they want. And that's something that really, I guess, as a skeptic, you have to ponder, is that at some point, they can keep doing that. They can keep narrowing and narrowing and narrowing that goalpost. And but at some point, where it should click is that they have this idea that it's going to be a deductive argument that wins. And in their head, they have a deductive argument that wins. And but really, it's the inductive argument that's much more compelling and powerful. What other ideas do I want to add in here? The goodness of God. The goodness of God is seen. There's another part of 120 or thereabouts, I think a verse near there, that the goodness of God should be evident in His creation. Well, if the goodness of God is evident in His creation, then the goodness of God is seen in amoebic dysentery. When amoebic dysentery gets in your gut, these little creatures are at their best. That seems to, if they were designed, that's what they were designed to do. They're designed to get into your guts and just expanding until it can kill you. You know, you can diarrhea yourself to death on that. Parasitic wasps that are, if they were designed to insert their larvae into living animals that eat them from the inside out. If the goodness of God is reflected in that, wow, you got quite an idea of what goodness is. Yeah, I think that was most of the main points, and I'm getting up there. So, there was that funny bit at the end. The funny bit at the end was, he was kind of trying to goad someone like Thunderfoot or the Amazing Atheist to address him, which would be like a huge win for him, of course, because it would just bring a whole bunch of attention to him. And so he could live out his narcissistic fantasy. Not that I wouldn't like to have more viewers, but it's a matter of what I'm prepared to do that. I heard Kate, or Bionic Dance, addressed him, and if she did, that was a matter of comedy value. And I'm afraid, frankly, that's pretty much. I don't expect a response back, and already kind of anticipating what the response will look like. Yeah, no, I've heard it before. But, whatever. Anyways, 72 Day Star, out.